Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 6 of The Raw Men. Today we've got Zack Kopplin. On our title, we said that he started as a teenage, or I was a teenage activist, because he's been in this game a while already and going in the right direction. And Mark Nebo, of course, my usual co-host. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well. We got some new windows put in the house today. I feel like a new man. It felt like a prison in here with the shoddy windows we had before. So things are going good. Welcome, Zach.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me on.
All right. So, Zach, somebody's got a lag on here. I'm getting repeated myself. Much as I like to hear myself talk, can we turn that down or something?
Yeah. Put these back on.
I couldn't hear it, Zach. The veteran to this activism game as he is, he forgot his headphones, but he's good to go now.
Okay, I'm still listening to. Where's that feedback coming from?
I don't hear it, man. Do you hear it, Zach?
I don't hear anything.
Well, that's just too weird. Okay, hang on. I got it. I got another window open. That's what it is. My end. Okay, good. All right, here I am blaming everybody else, and it's my fault.
Riveting podcasting for you out there listening. Riveting podcasting.
Yeah. Old men in technology. Okay, so Zach, go ahead and tell us about yourself more than what we got out of Wikipedia. Give me your background. What got you started?
So I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and when I was in 10th grade, my governor decided to sign a law that allows the critiques of evolution to be taught in public schools. Now, the whole point of this law, according to the legislator who sponsored it, is to have the scientific evidence, as he said, for creationism to be brought into public schools. And Governor Jindal, who signed it, said the same thing. He said we need to teach creationism because it's the very best science. Intelligent design is the very best science, he said. And so this happened back when I was a sophomore in high school in 2008. And
okay, just so I want to be clear that what your governor, Bobby Jindal, said is the very best science possible, and I was stunned when I saw that he'd said those words, that he's saying this in 2008, and in 2005, Kitzmiller versus Dover had already refuted that as creationism and not science at all.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Jindal makes that big of a distinction between intelligent design or creationism these days.
And we're talking about the 2016 presidential candidate here, folks.
Yes. Luckily, I'm going to say this. He doesn't stand a chance because his poll numbers in Louisiana are so low. You can't run for president as the most disliked governor in the country, which is about where he is.
But yeah, then there's something that I think my governor could beat your governor at, because isn't it possible that our governor is more hated than yours?
I'm not sure. I mean, the question is, Rick Perry's cut education, he's cut everything, but has he cut them as much as Bobby Jindal has? Because Governor Jindal may have done even more.
Send us a tweet at the Ramen Podcast. Tell us who's more hated, Rick Perry or Bobby Jindal.
Yeah, because here in Texas, Rick Perry wants to run to be president also. That's why he resigned as governor. And
that's why he has glasses now.
Right. Yeah.
So, but recent polls show that actually Texas Republicans prefer, drumroll, Ted Cruz.
Well, there you go.
Well,
the stupid just keeps coming.
Speaking of Texas, one of my favorite people is going to be our next lieutenant governor, probably Senator Dan Patrick. He runs the education committee in the state and has announced that not only should creationism be taught in public schools, it needs to be heralded and triumphed. So that's sort of the state we're in.
Yeah.
That just
sort of brought silence.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say to that. That sounds even worse.
Okay, so before we get ahead of ourselves and start talking about what happened 2 weeks ago and what happened last week and everything, catch us up to speed. Pick up your story.
Yeah, so in 2008 we passed this law, and my immediate assumption was that this is just stupid and it won't last. They're going to repeal this, it'll get thrown out in court. It won't last at all. And so I waited a year. Nothing happened. I waited another year. Nothing happened except that this parish right next door to mine in Louisiana, and by the way, for all of you who don't know much about my home state, our version of county is a parish because we're French. And the parish right next door to mine had this whole discussion about how there's this law that would allow them to teach creationism, and while they didn't want a lawsuit, they need to stand up for Jesus and teach creationism in their schools, and this was the way to do it. And so they had this big discussion, and that was the only thing I'd seen about this law, is that it was actually being used in my home. And so I had a project for high school to graduate when I was 17, and I said I might as well try and repeal this law for my senior project, and got started. And so we built this amazing coalition of 78 Nobel laureates now, major science organizations, tens of thousands of people, clergy, basically you name them, we have them. And we have everyone besides the Louisiana legislators. And so we've gone in now 4 times trying to get this law repealed. The first time we went in there and we had a former state legislator, she has now retired, thankfully, tell us that she didn't really need to listen to all these people with little letters behind their names. And that by little letters, she means Nobel laureates. And we were voted down 5-1 in the Education Committee trying to repeal the creationism law. And by the way, y'all, Governor Jindal sends staff down every year to try and stop us from repealing this law. So he's firmly in the camp of protecting teaching creationism in Louisiana. And we've lost now 4 years straight because Louisiana's legislators don't like science. We had a legislator who told us that this law shouldn't be repealed, not just because of creationism, but if we block alternative science from the classroom by calling it pseudoscience and not letting people critique it, then this man, he had a really magical experience with a witch doctor. This man, he was semi-clothed in the dust. He was shaking some bones. And our state legislator described this experience where this man in the dust shaking some bones told him about problems in his history and in his past, and how if he had discounted this as pseudoscience, he wouldn't have learned very important things. And so we can't take creationism or faith healing out of the science classroom, because that might be very bad. Or we had a legislator who told us all he knew about science, all he knew about evolution was from Wikipedia, and they had skipped that chapter in his high school class. And so he wasn't going to repeal this law unless we could show him some E. coli turning to people, because that's what evolution means. And so this is sort of what we're up against in Louisiana. And I launched a campaign to repeal this law. We've been fighting, we will be fighting, but it's not just about this fight in the legislature. I mean, the last 6 months, there's been a case in Louisiana, I mentioned to Aaron earlier, where we had a school teaching creationism to a kid in Louisiana. And so this kid, C.C. Lane, had to go, he was in his sixth grade science class, and they had a test on biology. And the teacher had left at the bottom, instead of evolution, isn't it amazing what the blank had done? And a bunch of exclamation marks at the end. And apparently he was supposed to put in the Lord into the blank. Now, this kid was Buddhist, and he had never really been exposed to too many Christians before, and so he didn't actually know what to put in there, so he just sort of gave up on his test at that point and left it blank. And so the teacher brings this test up to the front of the classroom and waves it around, saying, hey, look at the stupid kid who didn't know the answer. And his adoptive sister's in the same class and says, well, that's because he's Buddhist. He doesn't know what to put there. And the teacher announces, Buddhism is stupid, evolution is stupid, it's a stupid theory for stupid people, and then proceeds to harass the student because he did not put in, isn't it amazing what the Lord has made on his biology test. And when they brought the school superintendent, instead of being helpful, she told the student and his mother that, 1, they should change their religion, and 2, if they didn't convert to Christianity, well, they might as well transfer to another high school. This superintendent would allow them to transfer to a school where there are, quote, more Asians. So now we have not just religious profiling, but also racial. And the school district had to settle in court and apologize and promise never to do this again. And they're now the student is now in another school, with the parish paying for his buses to that other school, so he doesn't have to be back in a place that tormented him. And this is the climate that's started in Louisiana.
At least there's some justice. I mean, we don't only hear about atrocities. Thank you for giving that one up note.
I mean, justice is relative. The teacher's not fired. I think she should be fired.
Well,
that's
absolutely.
my personal opinion. And I mean, I don't believe even there's a consent decree from the court saying she can no longer teach creationism. But I wouldn't be surprised to see in a year or two the test with isn't it amazing what the Lord has made back on it.
How do you you're in a state where they teach creationism anyway.
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? I mean, how do you hold somebody accountable for teaching something that is demonstrably wrong?
So it's legal cover is what this law does. And if, let's say this case I just brought up had actually gone to trial, which it didn't. It was settled before the school apologized and said we won't do this anymore because it's wrong and we were bad. So let's say it goes to court. The teacher says, well, you can't punish me because even if the law doesn't directly say teach creationism, and there's a little silly religious disclaimer at the end, which has been a staple of creationism laws back since the first creationism law that was thrown out in Louisiana by the Supreme Court in Edwards versus Aguilar, that said this isn't meant to promote religion or non-religion, is what they put on the bottom. Sort of wink and a nod, say that we can try and get around the court rulings, but it's still a creationism.
We just want to be fair and balanced.
Well, I mean, the fascinating thing, as a side note, I've seen legal arguments from the creationists about they want to have their cake and eat it. They have their legal disclaimer to try and get around court rulings to say, well, you can't say we're being promoting religion because look, we say right here we're not. And then they also, on the flip side, say, well, if it's not, you can't promote non-religion, so you can't teach evolution, is what they'll also say. And so they want to have it both ways. You can't teach evolution without creation. It's just facetious, is the only word to describe it.
Okay, so pick up your story from that point. You said the 4 years, and you kind of did a summary there, but I mean, you were picking up speed as a high school student, getting some notoriety from that, right?
Yeah. But the big problem is no matter what you do, it has not budged the needle on the overall scale. I mean, we still have this creationism law in Louisiana. I've gotten involved with school vouchers, which are these awful things where the state, there's now a bunch of states that are funding private schools that teach things like the Loch Ness Monster is real and disproves evolution. Scientists are sinful men who are trying to explain the world so they don't have to be accountable to God. Evolution is the way of the heathen. And we have a bunch in Louisiana. And there's a few hundred in Florida that teach creationism and get public money. That's the worst state, actually, when it comes to vouchers. So we still have all these voucher programs across the country. Those are only expanding. Since I got started on this project, Tennessee passed a law copying Louisiana's. We still see creationism laws introduced in a dozen places all around the country every year. Oklahoma usually has 2 creationism bills introduced. We see that about 40 to 48% consistently of the American population believes in young Earth creationism and thinks everything was created in its present form in the last 10,000 years, so at least they respond to Gallup polls saying that. And while we could even say, well, maybe the number's off a little bit and that's political identification, but the thing is, the number has stayed consistently the same over the last 30 years. It's always been between 40 and 48% no matter what's happened. And my little guess on that comes from another number, which is 20% of teachers in America, 15 to 20% are actively teaching creationism in their classrooms. And another 60% are not teaching evolution properly, either because they're afraid, because they don't believe it, because they don't understand it, because you've got the high school gym teacher who has to teach a class too, and is teaching biology and doesn't know how to teach it. And so that's why people don't really get evolution, because they don't get taught it.
Yeah, now this is where we're going to plug what we're doing. We've just begun.
Aaron, don't you have a project that kind of runs into that?
Yeah, a couple of them actually. But one that we just started here recently was to do classroom supplement videos, recognizing that you have the 20% of teachers that are creationists and who are either refusing to teach the science properly or deliberately teaching the science improperly. And then of the teachers who don't object to teaching evolution for maybe they accept it, but maybe they don't understand it, maybe they don't teach it adequately, maybe they're afraid of parents reacting, because you've seen how in Missouri, for example, they tried to pass a law warning parents when evolution was going to be taught. So you know that the students are primed by religious groups to disrupt the classrooms if there's an evolutionary study, and you know that the parents are going to storm down to the principal's office, and then so you're going to have students, parents, faculty, the PTA, everybody in an uproar because you tried to teach something that was factually correct, and why don't you just teach the mythology like you're supposed to? So, and then you've got some teachers that really don't understand it and couldn't teach it adequately, and they really should have a standardized kind of exam. So at one point we did a presentation in the Houston Museum of Natural Science where we talked about all of the things that were in the Texas TEKS that the Texas Essential
Yeah.
Knowledge and Skills, the standards that were passed in Texas, and I'm talking to a Texas audience, and I said, okay, now all of these things have been in place for a number of years, and if you were into school in Texas, you were all taught all these things, right? And of course, they weren't. Nobody was. It wasn't. It didn't matter what's in the TEKS. These people are not being taught that. The teachers are finding some way to just ignore that whole week of school if that's how much they gave it, and go on and do something
be a
else.
week. It should be like the entire teaching of biology should be about evolution.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, because it is integral to the rest of biology.
I mean, what else do you teach in biology if you don't talk about evolution? Are you just teaching? I mean, I know this is what the creationists want, but are you just teaching classification?
Okay, well, let's talk about that for a moment.
This is actually a really interesting thing too.
I got a letter from a concerned parent over his high school student was taking multiple or dual course classes for college, and the class he's taking is zoology. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you take zoology and not teach evolution and not teach classification? They didn't have a biologist, anybody with a biology degree of any sort, teaching this class. They had a coach, a high school gym coach, teaching zoology. They hired a creationist to teach college zoology. So what he did, having no understanding of or belief in evolution, what he did instead was, for weeks on end as this course progressed, he held mock debates in the classroom where he would have one student using the talking points provided by Ann Coulter.
Okay. Lovely.
That's how disturbingly bad that is.
And so this is public school, of course, right?
Yes, of course. So, I mean, when his teacher complained, or when not a teacher, but when a parent complained to me, I said, look, there's an easy way to nip this in the bud. I said, it's absolutely necessary that we get documentation. We need to get some kind of admission as to what was really happening. So I want you to write to that coach and ask, just for confirmation of what your child is telling you, are you really saying these things? And we're talking about several weeks into the course, so there's no excuse for not covering the course material at this point. We're several weeks into it. It's only 11 weeks, 15 weeks, something like that, and we're already 3 or 4 or 5 in. So he sends the letter, and with my recommendation, he sends it to the coach and carbons it to the principal, not blind carbon copy, but carbon, so that you can see that the letter to him is also going to the principal, but that it's also going to me. And it's also going to the Texas Citizens for Science and the National Center for Science Education and the Texas Freedom Network and the ACLU and American Atheists. And I had this huge list of people to be carbon copied in this letter. So 30 minutes later, the gym coach writes back to the parent saying, it was a joke. We were just kidding. For 3 or 4 weeks, they were just kidding.
Also, if you say it's a joke, it's also an admission you said it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a joke, but it wasn't the type of joke.
The kind
of so yes, you can't get a proper education out here. So what we were doing was that we're taking the lessons that are supposed to be taught that many teachers don't know how to teach. Maybe they don't have the ability to teach it. Maybe they don't want to catch the political flack from the students if they teach it. And so we can remove their identity from the lesson. And we're going to go with standardized lessons. Literally, we're using the next generation science standards, which are the national standards. And we're setting up a series of videos explaining, like in 10-minute segments, various aspects of science that are supposed to be taught, even in Texas. I just have to
cut you off for a second.
What's that?
You just said a dirty word in Texas. You said national standards.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. But at least I didn't do the CC word. You know.
Common Core.
Yeah. So I said next generation science standards, so people won't be able to distinguish that from Star Trek.
I mean,
let me before we go any further, I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show, as we said last week when we had our guest Joey Kirkman, this episode of the Ramen Podcast is sponsored by Joey Kirkman and the rest of the people at Bedtime Bible Stories. Have you seen that graphic novel, Zach?
No, I actually haven't.
It's right here. I actually have a copy. It's actually a graphic representation of verbatim stories in the Bible about the flood and the Pharaoh murdering people and the bears eating kids and all that. verbatim, but drawn for your enjoyment. So,
I mean,
bedtimebiblestories.com.
what's the guy's name? Like Jack Kirby, whatever. Like, oh, I'm blanking on his name, but the guy, he really hates evolution too. But he does a lot of illustrations of those, but for a different, like, just to sort of scare the kids.
Well, no, these are supposed to be uplifting stories about the Lord, but they turn out to be massacres drawn like Saturday morning cartoons. So, we appreciate Joey sponsoring the show.
Yeah, and I understand that I'm in that book. And
yeah, you are in the book, and Jamila Bay and David Silverman and Amanda Knief and all kinds of people. So, Zach, do you? I'm sure that you have examples of school time lessons in the great state of Louisiana that directed you to creationism.
So I actually am really lucky that I've never been taught myself. I mean, there's plenty of. I've thankfully had very good science teachers, but it's one of those things that permeates the state. You grow up in Louisiana, and you know you're part of the stupid state as people see it. Like, you leave state, and people would ask me, "Oh, you're from Louisiana." Like,
well, put it this way.
And
you know that you're
this law.
Yeah, you know that you're on another level when Jeff Foxworthy singles you out from the rest of the rednecks. So.
Well, see, I think that Louisiana is really no better off than Texas, no worse off than Texas, because both of us, you know, here in Texas, we very often look at our ridiculous laws and say, hey, at least we're not Mississippi.
I mean, Texas just today has officially banned abortion clinics, so, I mean, for what that's worth.
Wow, that's news.
Yeah, the HB2 just got through I think it was through the Fifth Circuit today, like a few minutes ago.
Look at Aaron. Aaron, you can't even handle it. Aaron has to go look stuff up.
HB2 is like the, for everyone listening, do y'all remember the whole ambulatory regulations for abortion clinics in Texas that made a lot of national news and made Wendy Davis famous?
Yeah.
This is the bill that she was filibustering, has now just been approved by the courts. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I didn't take the time to read it because it was as I was coming on. But I think that's what just happened.
Yeah,
it says right here. Yep. The Fifth Circuit allows HB2 to take effect. All but 7 clinics in Texas to close.
Hooray! We've now gone back to the Dark Ages.
Yeah, let's hear it for regress.
Yeah. I mean, at least Louisiana has more fun culture. At least we've got good music and good food and, like, our own unique place that's not really the same as the rest of America.
And you have Jerry DeWitt.
Yeah, that too.
Okay.
I mean, I can give you also some fun examples of lessons in Texas. I just mentioned this to you earlier. This thing called Responsive Ed. It's the largest charter program in the state of Texas, one of the largest in the nation. Had about 65 schools by this spring, and was supposed to open 20 more before the end of this year. Receives around $80 million from the state every year, and was teaching things like the fossil record is sketchy, and scientists doubt evolution, and supernatural creation is equally valid to evolution. This is the largest charter program in the state of Texas. Also has schools in Indiana and Arkansas. So in January, I published about this for Slate, and they removed every direct reference to creation in their books, but really nothing else. They're still teaching really awful science meant to undermine evolution, saying that there wasn't enough time for humans to evolve. They have this really asinine description of how mammals evolve, saying, well, if a new species is created every 100,000 years and there's only been that amount of time since mammals first evolved, we can only have 600 species of mammals total, because obviously things can't evolve independently of each other. You only get one species at a time. And they're teaching that in a biology book still, even after getting in trouble. And so the state of Texas, after I wrote this article for Slate about what they're doing, said, oh, we're going to start an investigation. And I recently talked to the Texas Education Agency and said, hey, how's your investigation going? And learned, hey, we actually didn't do one because we decided it was fine. So they announced it publicly and then just didn't have an investigation of what the school was teaching. Also, the school was teaching really, really shit history. The only way to describe it. They were teaching that Japan's involvement in World War II was because of the samurai, which is really odd because the samurai disbanded about 70 years before that. They described the natives of the Philippines as Catholics, Muslims, not Muslims, Muslims, and then pagans in various levels of civilization in the history book.
And where are these textbooks?
There are these things called responsive ed knowledge units. They're used by responsive ed schools and sold to anyone else who wants them. And they're in at least 65 schools, or around 65 schools right now. Some other schools, they have these things. Yeah, they have these things called classical academies, which is their flagship, which I found out at least one of them is using Discovery Institute materials at. So going to the deep dive, have y'all heard of Accelerated Christian Education?
No.
So Accelerated Christian Education is a major homeschool publisher. And I mentioned vouchers earlier. They're a big voucher school. Like, they provide a lot of the curriculum for vouchers. They're actually the ones who were responsible originally for the Loch Ness Monster is Real and Disproves Evolution curriculum. And beyond that, it's just basically rote memorization and is really terrible curriculum. And so in about 95, they realized we're teaching all these private school kids, but the vast majority of Americans are going to go to hell because they're not getting our education. So somehow we need to infiltrate the public school. They were very disturbed. They're like, charters are the great thing. The only problem is they're still public schools and we can't teach religion in them. So we have to figure out a way to sneak it in. And so they founded this thing called Texas Eagle Academies, which eventually became responsive ed. And they switched a lot of their senior staff from this religious organization over to the charter school and basically kept the entire same teaching, the same method of teaching, the same material, and just brought it all over to a public school and pretended they were secular. In fact, one of the guy who runs responsive ed curriculum and he ran his own charter program for a little while, then merged with responsive ed, and he came from ACE originally. And now he proudly announced that his curriculum is sold. It gets around the so-called separation of church and state doctrine and is used in public schools with taxpayer money in 11 states. Proudly announced that.
I think it should be a spoiler alert to all the teachers listening. If you have to, quote-unquote, sneak something in to your curriculum, it's probably not legit, yeah.
Yeah, and so the thing is...
But you got to remember that our Board of Education, we've had people on our Texas State Board of Education that said that public education was a tool of the devil.
I mean, there's also a couple members who
the devil
challenge
a lively character.
They insist there's no such thing as a separation of church and state and offer. Here's a challenge for everyone. Try and get $1,000 from Ken Mercer and David Bradley on the Texas State Board of Education. If you can show them the separation of church and state is in the Constitution, then they'll give you $1,000, they say. Now, they want the literal words because apparently they're not big fans of reading comprehension. But
yeah,
or inference.
Go give it a try. See if you can explain court cases and like if they can read the sentence. If they can read the First Amendment, it's a clear wall of separation. Maybe you can help convince them of that and get $1,000.
And if not that, we have the other documents explaining what was intended by that, and this is what they meant.
Well, I mean, the State Board doesn't like Thomas Jefferson very much either. They tried to get rid of him.
Yeah.
Okay, speaking of the First Amendment, I'm going to remind everyone that the Be Secular has a First Amendment leather wrist strap that is quite high quality. If you're interested in that, and if you buy one and you select American Atheist, for example, American Atheist will get 10% of them, $10 from the purchase. So fund a good resource and look flashy. Did you know about that, Zach? Do you know about Be Secular? Since that's my thing.
Enlighten me.
Well, everybody's listening and Aaron already knows, but Be Secular is a socially conscious company. We have about 40 affiliates around the secular movement, and what we do is when people buy items on our website, the group that they select from that drop-downs when they select an item gets 50% of the profits straight away. They don't have to pay anything to be involved. We have like Recovering from Religion, Foundation Beyond Belief, Black Atheists of America, American Atheists, Camp Quest, all these other groups out there, so people can support all those groups and get items that they like that can help support a secular America at besecular.com.
Yeah, and Zach, do we need to resume on your story? Because I think we've been jumping around.
We did. We got way off track.
Yeah. Back to story. So, I mean, it's basically been a continual campaign of trying to fight the creationists. And I mean, what's better to go into maybe is specific issues. And so, talk about, it started, the first time I ever got involved was back in 2010 when we had a hearing over science textbooks in Louisiana. And at that point, we just assumed the creationists were going to get rid of all of Louisiana's biology textbooks. That was what the media assumed, was what everyone assumed, that there was no way. They managed to get the biology textbooks pulled out of the normal adoption and sent to this little panel that didn't exist before. And the two people in charge of the panel were the legislator who had sponsored Louisiana's creationism law and the guy who had handled the bill for him in the House. So the two head creationists were in charge of the panel deciding what to do about Louisiana's biology books. And of course, they really didn't like them. And they said, we need to wait and see what Texas does, which I'm sure, as you would know, is probably a terrible idea to see what Texas does with biology.
Yeah, let's follow Texas's leading role in this. Yeah, because they've been such a...
That's teacher creationism.
Yeah, they've been such a great example up to now.
So somehow, despite the creationist protests, despite things like threats of, like, we actually had the head of one of the local religious right groups, the Focus on the Family affiliate in Louisiana, walked up to the front of our state board with a T-shirt that said "Natural Selection" and said, "This is the same T-shirt that Dylan Klebo wore when he shot all them kids at Columbine. If we have these books, the same thing will happen here. Do you want a shooting on the streets of Baton Rouge?" Like, in the halls of Southeastern University in Louisiana. That's what will happen if we teach evolution.
Right. That's like Hitler had a mustache, so don't wear a mustache because you'll kill people.
Also, I mean, I'm sure Hitler also got brought up at some point in the "don't teach evolution" thing.
Of course.
And so, despite all this, somehow we got these biology books approved, and actually have real biology textbooks in Louisiana. Sadly, now after 4 years, after we won that, the creationists immediately tried to decentralize all the textbooks, so they didn't actually have to use textbooks that taught evolution, and it finally looks like they've succeeded. But it took them 4 years to get there. We had good biology textbooks for 4 years at least. And
that nobody used.
Well, now everyone had to use. Now they don't.
Ah.
And so the thing about the Louisiana Science Education Act is at first they had to teach the material in the textbooks. If you make it so there's no approved textbooks, then whatever. Just teach what you want.
Whatever loophole is necessary so that we can lie to other people's children and promote complete nonsense with no justification, and it doesn't matter how dishonest it is because the ends justifies the means.
Correct, apparently.
And as long as we can get their tithe, and as long as we can hold our phony baloney positions of assumed prestige and power, then it's all good. And it doesn't matter how many people have to pay for it.
And so there's sort of three threads to the creationism thing. Fight the textbooks, which we're seeing in Louisiana and in Texas. That's what we did big time last year, is dealing with the biology books in Texas. They want to screw with the curriculum, which they haven't yet done in Louisiana, but they've definitely done in Texas. And then they just want to pass general legislation like we have in Louisiana to teach creationism. So that's sort of the prongs of what the creationists are trying to get after. Besides, they also want a court ruling to overturn both Edwards versus Aguilar, which invalidates the teaching of creationism in public schools, and Dover versus Kitzmiller, which is a federal district court ruling which says intelligent design is creationism and is also unconstitutional. That's sort of the agenda we're getting at here.
Gotcha. And I just mentioned that in a presentation that I did like a week ago, where we have to retry both of those trials again.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that you prove these people wrong, because it's not about what's true or what's false. All that's important is that you believe, and whether you believe matters more than whether it's true.
Mm-hmm. And so the Louisiana Science Education Act and legislation like this may be the next test case to have to throw creationism out of the schools. I hope it doesn't get to that, because I would prefer not to have to deal with a court case. I'd rather politicians just do the right thing and repeal a bad law. I mean, it just doesn't seem to be working. And we're going to have more cases in Louisiana like we have with the Lane versus Sabine Parish one, and have to have more kids talk creationism and more people get in trouble and more money's wasted on stupid court cases that shouldn't happen in the first place.
Well, now you're showing your actual youth, because you must be amazingly naive that you lived in Louisiana and now you live in Texas and you're expecting politicians to do the right thing.
Come on, you could hear a little bit of sarcasm. And we've got a few politicians, Senator Karen Carter-Peterson every year, who keeps sponsoring our bill to repeal the creationism law. Awesome. Senator Dan Claytor, who's actually a Republican, which Republicans get a very bad rap, often deserved, for being anti-science, because we have people like Republican Governor Bobby Jindal, who hates science. We have people like, what's his name, Brown, right? Congressman Brown in
Scott Brown.
No, not Scott Brown. Brown. He's from Georgia, and he called evolution alive from the pit of hell.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and then we've got Rick. We've got Rick Bratton, who wants to. I can't. He said that teaching evolution or teaching natural selection, as he put it, was an infringement on people's beliefs or their right to believe otherwise. And that's all that matters, is you have to be able to believe whatever you want, and to hell with what the facts are. Yeah,
and so you have a lot of these Republicans really trying to convince you that science is a political issue, that one party's anti-science. But thankfully we have someone like Dan Claytor in Louisiana who's actually doing the right thing and making it not a political issue. He's just making it, this is reality, this is right, we're going to teach science. So we've got a couple good politicians.
And I don't understand when they bring up this thing about having the right to believe something. Okay, fine. Why would people get upset if you teach that Benjamin Franklin was the first king of America? Here's the funny thing. I thought this would be a great way to illustrate the point. When somebody teaches that in class, somebody's going to be outraged. Somebody's going to step up and correct them, right? But I've actually had people tell me, using that specific example, that if parents are paying for their children's education and that's what they want them to learn, that's what they should be taught.
Well, I know we said we'll hold this for a little later, but I want to jump to the State Board of Education thing. Do you remember the debate about lesser and greater jihad at the State Board, where there was a scholar of religion trying to explain that while jihad in the American mind means holy war and a physical war, in many people's minds, there's two types of jihad: internal, about doing good for yourself, and external, which may be about doing good for the world, or it could be an aggressive war, and some people have taken it that way.
And that jihad does not literally translate as war, but rather as struggle.
Yeah, and so while some people have gone and been very violent with it, that does not mean everyone's mindset or the accepted way to explain it as a religious scholar does not mean holy war, ISIS, kill, kill, kill. Now, we had a state board member and some people testifying will say, well, the Americans think it means that, and so that's what we're going to teach, because it doesn't matter what it actually means. It matters what random people from East Texas think jihad means. That's really what the historical meaning is, and it's just it blows my mind.
Well, how long did we refer to all Native Americans as Indians? How long had it been that we realized that this was not India?
Well, apparently,
we continued.
We're still now apparently referring to all the Native Americans in the Texas history books as Hispanics, which I heard recently. I was not aware the books were referring to all the indigenous populations as Hispanic, which unsurprisingly offended them.
Yeah, literally, it was taken from the original word that they came up with, Mexica, which is where they came up with the word Mexico, which means that all Native Americans are Mexicans.
Yeah. So speaking of offensiveness on that whole issue again, I mean, we still have that.
By the way, I did a compilation video for all these people's testimony. Did you see that?
Went through most of it, and
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just wanted to let you know it was up there. I didn't keep everybody's thing because obviously there was a lot of stuff that was too long, but I put the highlights of everybody's commentary.
Did you enjoy being accused of bulldozing Moses? By the way, the Texas school books currently teach that Moses is the foundation of American government, and biblical principles have caused the separation of powers. I'm not really sure how that works, but Don McElroy, who was the former head of the State Board of Education and is a creationist dentist best known for proudly
stand up for experts.
Bingo. Proudly announcing someone has to stand up to the experts. And he was the one to do it. I had a little chat with him about the textbooks the other day, and he sort of explained to me exactly why Moses is responsible for the American government. And Moses and the covenant mean that man, and you know, let's think about it. Adam means that man is sinful because man is fallen. And so the founders in their wisdom of being founding America as a Christian nation recognized man was sinful because they were fallen creatures, and recognized they could not put all the power in one person, and so we have to have a separation of power. And it's evidence, because we have a separation of power, that we're a Christian nation.
Okay, and the documentation leading to these wild conclusions?
It's obvious man is fallen and sinful, and so we have a separation of powers. That's all you need, at least in their mind. One of the school board members also said Leviticus caused the separation of powers, and I'm not sure how things like not eating grape skins translates into the separation of powers, but that's what we're teaching in Texas.
Yeah, Leviticus, isn't that also where it says that that female slaves can be purchased for half price?
There's a bunch of laws in there. I don't know. I don't know which law is which, but the grape skin one was very interesting to me, which is why I remember it. It was a very unique touch. Don't eat grape skins. I think it might have been like at a certain season or something.
Yeah, because when you're the uber galactic super lord that you've created a cosmos, 78 bazillion light years across, that's what really matters to you. Because you have to have people lop off you have to have people lop off the foreskins that you had them be born with, because that's what matters.
Right.
I mean,
that's the important part.
When you put it that way, obviously.
Yeah, now I want to mention something else, because, I mean, you did get a lot of notoriety, and I didn't want to talk a lot about this, but I do have to bring this up. I mean, when I looked you up, I didn't expect to see a Wikipedia listing, and I'm hating you right now because you're listed in Wikipedia. I'm not in Wikipedia. Why do I know all these people that are on Wikipedia? And I'm not
you'll probably be in Wikipedia by the end of this video. No,
yeah, I don't think so. I've been hearing that for like 2-3 years. It hasn't.
I mean, you said this too loudly to people, and maybe you're daring them right now, saying, "I won't be in Wikipedia by the end of this episode." Now someone's out there listening, going, "Oh, haha, he thinks that."
I wasn't jealous that you were on Wikipedia. I was jealous that you were on Bill Maher.
No, I have a specific complaint here, because it talks about how he would not only is he on Wikipedia, and not only was he on Bill Maher, and I know why he's on Bill Maher. I mean, I had some friends telling me that I should be on Bill Maher, but I know they always want the attractive guy and not me.
They can take me, and I'll talk about you.
But he's on with Bill Maher and let's see what was on MSN, Vogue, Mashable, the New York Times, the Washington Post, Huffington Post, Moyers and Company, MSNBC, NPR, blah 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 blah. Right.
And now
the
ramen.
And they don't even bother to mention that in those early days you had also.
I was on your place first.
Exactly. You were interviewed by me on the Magic Sandwich Show. It's not in here. This is unfair.
See how the world comes back around from the Magic Sandwich Show through all that back to the Ramen Podcast. What a small world.
Yeah. So I'm mad, and I'll go stew in the corner now.
I mean, Wikipedia is open source. You can always go edit it. Yeah,
well, that's what happened. Somebody actually put me on Wikipedia once upon a time, and I was there for all of 10 minutes. And then somebody else just pulled me off, and that was it. So over and done. All right. So what now?
What now?
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, after about 4 years of trying the policy work, it's been making me ask, how do we actually make something happen? Not just, I mean, because we can keep fighting these fights over and over and over again, but we know creationism is being taught in the schools right now. I mean, there's going to be a kid tomorrow in their high school biology class getting taught creationism, and that is a fact. And there's not just going to be one or two. There's going to be thousands, hundreds of thousands across the country.
There are dozens of schools here in Texas that are teaching biblical creationism through a loophole in the religious science studies, or the religious studies class, where they teach
the Oregon science too. There's the same loophole in the curriculum standards as we have in Louisiana for law.
Yes, I mean they've actually got several inroads in how to do this. And what irritates me is that I always thought that people had accountability enough that if you were to put them on a witness stand and you were to force them to concede that what they're teaching is in fact false, that when they see the error of their ways, that people would be accountable enough once they have realized and once they have admitted that what they're doing is wrong, that they would stop and that they would fix themselves. But one of my first ventures into mainstream activism was a moderated public debate with Don McLeroy as one of the moderators in a public debate against one of these people that was courting the Board of Education. Another moderator was Terry Leo. And my opponent in that debate admitted that he knew that there were transitional species, but
And then immediately...
he said he admitted that he knew that there were, but that he wanted to teach students that there were none, because he said it was important that they believe that there were none. And actually taking action. And so, who do you know? And please let us know. Who do you know that is actually doing something, trying to fix things, and might actually make a difference? Please let us know however you can. You can reach me by email and by Twitter and by all these other means that Mark would normally be much more fluid in, since he handles all of that kind of networking. So.
Yeah. And also, as I always say, and I'm sure you'd agree with this, Arn, if you're being taught creationism, or your kid's being taught creationism, or you have a friend whose kid's being taught creationism, just give us, send us an email, find our Facebooks, and tell us, because we can connect. We can take action. We can connect you with the people who can help. We'll write about it. We'll talk about it, and we'll make it stop.
Yes, and Zach is somebody that although, as you said, 4 years of not being able to overturn that law, you do know a thing or two about lobbying, about networking, about all of the activism, all the connections necessary to get these kinds of things done. You're making inroads in that. And one last thing I want to get into before we close this show down. Let me go ahead and get what you're planning to do for the future.
So the big thing right now is sort of stepping back and refocusing more on really figuring out how to actually make a change work. And that's where I'm going. And I've been trying to focus more not just on creationism and climate change and science denial, but also funding.
But also sex education, which is a huge deal here in Texas, since we have the highest rate of repeat teen pregnancy in the country.
I mean, well, we can throw that in. We can throw vaccines in. We can throw GMOs in. I mean, there's a whole just list of things people don't accept that are science and they don't like. But there's also a huge problem where we've slashed all the funding for our scientists, which is a gigantic problem. It means we have too many scientists for the funding right now. It means we're not... I mean, it's like 90% of projects at the NIH, I think, are unfunded right now, which is not because they're bad projects, but it's just we don't have the money. And that's literally people's lives that we've decided to let people die because we don't have the funding, because we won't do the science.
Yeah, and I would also like to talk to science advocates along those lines. So I mean, if this is your core interest, as it is mine, please contact me. I'd love to have you on the show. And I guess that's going to be about it. We're going to have to let it go from there. Mark, I hope you can hear me okay. I don't know what happened to Google Hangouts. Who knows? But we're going to close the show up with that. Zach, thank you very much for being on and for all that you've been doing so far. And I'm always delighted when I see you at these conferences. You know, at the school board, at the state capitol. It's always encouraging that there's at least some kind of ally out there.
Yeah, and you too. And thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. All right, good night, everybody, and that is it.
Sounds good. Bye.